people saying that one thing, Eunicia, that one thing helped me make better decisions and I rest better at night. That's the kind of stuff that makes my heart sing for joy every day.
Wow, that's great. Well, thank you.
Nothing in this podcast is intended to render legal, financial, medical, or other professional information. Because the details of your situation are fact-dependent, we highly encourage you to find a recommended individual that you can trust to give you the expertise that you need related to your situation.
Well, good morning or good evening, DocPreneur Nation. You're listening to Concierge Medicine Today's DocPreneur Leadership Podcast. And today we have a special guest. We have Eunicia Peret, and she is the CEO and owner of Excelstra. And today's topic is going to really center around what are the strategies and what are the things that doctors are doing financially to make them successful. Eunicia, thank you for being with us today.
It's a pleasure being here with you, Michael, and all of the listeners.
So tell me a little bit about you. And, I kind of jokingly tell this to our kids, like, hey, when you're in high school or college, like you don't ever 20 years from now think like, you know what? I've always wanted to work, in concierge medicine. Like I've always had that inkling. No, it kind of found me and I've really loved it. So what brought you into working with finances and with Excelstra, and how did it start? And why are you working specifically with doctors?
Well, those are really, really amazing questions. And frankly, a lot of it has actually quite a bit of grounding around the medical side as well as the financial side. Going back to high school, in high school, I was actually personally battling with what will I do when I grow up kind of a thing. And at one point in time, I wanted to go into medicine. Subsequently, I decided differently and I chose finance as a career. For myself, I ended up working with some of the most amazing finance type companies, financial industry. Think of a lot of large banks as well as insurance companies, as well as finance as a function. So, where does money come in? How does it clear the books? How do we make more, keep more, etc., for large organizations? A lot of multinationals and such. From a medical standpoint, we work with a lot of physicians. In part, the other personal aspect to my story is that my husband was pegged to become a doctor in his family. He ended up not becoming a doctor, so I'm a little bit of a black sheep from that standpoint. But I do work with a lot of physicians, and we have physicians in our family. A lot of my in-laws are actually physicians and dentists and pharmacists. And so I'm surrounded every day by individuals that are both doing exceptionally well in a medical career, medical field, as well as clients that come to us asking the question of what more could we do? They've kind of a lot of the individuals that we work with have outgrown the typical support that they get when it comes to money. And doctors are fit very clearly in that situation. They've graduated. Most of them earn a very nice living compared to the majority of the population, but they still have struggles, and finances are the last place where they would want to dive in and do things on a daily basis. So there's a lot of personal, both personal on the family side, personal for myself, and just overall the integration between what's been happening on that side with my career, as well as being in finance for so many years.
So I want to talk a little bit about you said something there, finance as a function. Explain what that means.
Finance as a function means, for our listeners, it would be accounts payable, accounts receivable, closing the books, FP&A, financial planning and analysis, meaning you're reviewing your financials and you're understanding, okay, how are you doing potentially both on a personal as well as on the practice side, right? Are you, how are you doing with cash flow? How are you doing with your ability to bring in new business and continue to grow? How do you think about scaling your company? If you're thinking about potentially exiting your company, what does that look like? That's very focused on the business side of things. On the personal side of things, because in what we do at Excelstra, we focus on both helping clients think through their business side, but also on the personal side as well, as how do we ensure that regardless of what happens with the industry, that regardless of what happens with, for many physicians, even as a job. Will they be okay in retirement? Will they be okay tomorrow? Right now, for example, there are a lot of physicians that are quite afraid, and some of them are just plain old paralyzed at the thought of it's not going to get easier, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And the big question in their minds is, are we going to be okay in retirement, or will the future imply that we have to work longer, harder just to maintain lifestyle? And so our job is to work with physicians to ensure that they don't have to do that, to find the things that need to be done in order to for them to be positioned for long-term success.
I have what one reviewer, and he was so sweet, and he wrote me an email and he explained what he meant by his review, and he's like, "I hope that didn't come across that way, but you ask all the pesky questions we want to know." And so I have some pesky questions that,
Oh,
based on what
good.
you were
Bring them
just
on.
saying, how many are still carrying debt? Like and I would say give us like average age ranges, and you're like, wow, like seriously? Or like now that they've got that paid off, where are they shoveling that money towards? Or so give it, and I've got more coming. So
I love the question. The way that I would dissect it is to say, just because physicians have debt does not mean that they're not also working on their financial betterment and establishing and strengthening their future lifestyle. Um, Especially when it comes to debt and whether or not it's good or bad, it's really relative to the individual. I would say that in most of the cases, the majority of physicians and even other business owners, practice owners and business owners that we work with, most of them have some form of debt. However, the debt, when they come to us, one of the things that we do is to analyze, is the debt good or bad? Meaning, is it helping us in some way? Because leverage is not bad. The ultra wealthy use leverage all the time. If it's bad, then we have a plan for how do we address it. If it's good, then we ask the question of, okay, is it impacting cash flow in any way? Is it making the individuals feel like having the debt is robbing them of potential security? And based on all of those permutations, we then identify, are they okay to have leverage or not? But in general, I would say the majority of individuals, 90% of individuals, will have some form of that, whether it be on the personal or on the business side. But that debt, let me clarify, is not credit card debt where they're sinking in credit card fees and they're not able to get out of it. Is strategic debt that enables them to leverage and build more wealth.
I'm sure this data is out there, but if you do happen to know, for those who are, younger physicians, when or what age are you thinking, or are you seeing out there from the finance side that they are finally done with the medical student loan debt?
It generally depends, to be brutally honest with you. Our clients, we don't have any clients that still have medical school debt. Most of them have long finished paying that off. And for the ones, should there be any that are still paying, I can think of, for example, pharmacists. We do have a couple of clients that we've worked with over the years that were pharmacists, still had pharmacy school debt. And their situation was a lot harder because they chose to go to some of the top brand name universities, and they came out with that, where the question was, can they afford a couch? Of course, these were case studies from a few years back, to where, again, the kind of individuals and practice owners, physicians that we work with now, even on the pharmaceutical side, most of them, if they have that debt, it's strategic leverage debt, meaning, they've purchased rental properties, they've purchased real estate, they've purchased investments where they chose that, hey, it's better to do this than pony up the alternative. And at the end of the day, some of the results are also commensurate with that. They're positioned to make more and bridge the gap to their future financial empowerment and security.
Um, I know every doctor needs help from a finance perspective. I mean, whether it's a little bit of help or a little bit of insight or advice. Um, Excelstra, let's talk about that first. Are, when we typically think about managing our finances as an individual, as a family member, as a parent, a spouse, we think about like, okay, there's certified financial planners, there's financial planning organizations I hear on the radio, there's, fee-only financial planners. Where does Excelstra fall into this mix? Are you more of a business advisor? And then where do you fall on the finance side? Kind of give us a big picture of who Excelstra is.
So Excelstra, at the core of what we are a wealth strategy consulting firm. The way that differentiates us from anybody else and any of the companies that you hear on the radio or even shows, or you go to even conferences and you see them having booths, is we are not product first ever. The other thing, and I could come back to that, but the other thing that we do that's very different from really any other firm out there is we transcend the gamut between the accounting tax side with tax strategies that, let me just be very clear, are not Googleable. So when individuals say, but just tell me what, it's like, no, we can't talk about the what, because our clients are under such heavy NDAs that when they see the power of what we do, they don't even want to share with their friends and neighbors what they're doing, because they're like, hey, this is like super special. We wouldn't have access to this unless we were working with that team of experts, which is where Excelstra comes in. So the accounting, the tax side, the tax strategies are a huge component of what we do with our clients. Then moving into kind of the second pillar, which focuses on investments, how, why, where does money grow? A lot of, especially physicians, are asking the question of, hey, we want to invest in things that aren't the pedestrian, the 401ks, the IRAs, the all of the different accounts that everybody talks about, because they want to do what the ultra wealthy do. Now, granted, when I say ultra wealthy, it doesn't mean that you have to have $100 million in your bank account in order to be able to qualify for those strategies. However, if you don't work with a team that actually is able to bring those strategies that typically are only available to the ultra wealthy, then you do what everybody else does. And so what we found is that typically individuals will be working with a financial advisor or a CPA or whomever they are. And when we tell our client is, listen, our role is not to displace your financial team. Our role is to help you have the checks and balances in place and look at every single aspect through the lens of, what are you missing? Because when we identify what are the blind spots that we have, what is the client missing, running a super strong SWOT analysis, what we're finding out is that in every single pillar, typically they've lost up until this point, if not hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of dollars, and they're positioned to continue on that trajectory if they continue doing the same, more of the same. The third pillar that we focus on is working with a lot of strategic partners on everything that deals on the exit strategy side. A lot of clients will come to us and say, do you do estate planning? It's like, yes, we do. But estate planning is, their mind is a will or a trust. Here's the thing, it doesn't stop there. When we're talking about exit strategies, we're talking about the will and the trust. Do they need to be there 100%? But if we start with that, it becomes a very gloomsday type of a discussion, because now we're thinking about what are we going to leave when we expire out of this world, versus the focus and the shift that we put on things is, we have to focus on how will we enhance the lifestyle while we're here. While you're working, the question is, when do you want to retire? If you own a practice, do you want to sell it? If you want to sell it, what does that look like? Who do you want to sell it to? There have been a lot of companies, for example, that exited themselves as partners to VC companies and then learned to regret it on the back end. We go through a lot of that thought leadership and discussion with our clients to make sure that whatever they do not look back with regret. So as you can see, we're transcended basically 3 different industries. And what we step in to do is to literally, we'll tell our clients, our job is not to displace your financial team, your legal team. Our job is to make sure you have the checks and balances. We're able to provide the SWOT analysis. We will show you the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when the clients see that their current utopia, as described to them by their existing team, in most cases ends up being uglier than our ugliest, that's where they go, hold on a second. You talk about things that my financial planner advisor, CFP, CFA, whatever titles they have, my CPA, my tax pro, they don't talk about. And oh, by the way, you're also showing me side by side how some of those things are basically costing me more than the 1% or 2% or whatever it is that they're paying. Now they learn that it's not about the fee, it's about how much value do we get to keep, because that value recuperated typically ends up to massive amounts of money. In many cases, small fortunes for most.
And our guest today is Eunicia Peret. She's the CEO and owner of Excelstra, and we'll put the links to how to learn more about Excelstra in the show notes below. I will disclaim this is not a sponsored podcast. They're not paying to be here. We just want to bring. We believe in, just like big organizations, it's a business principle, and I love bringing and folding over business principles into the healthcare marketplace, especially for doctors. Because we say a lot around here, it's no longer about being the best doctor in the world anymore. It's about being the best doctor for the world and for your patients and for your local community. And as Dr. Chopra talked about sleep not a few weeks ago in a podcast here, he said, we are a better lever to help our patients when we get better sleep and we equip ourselves with the right people around us. And one of the business principles I love to lean on is that if big organizations have a board of advisors, you should have an individual a board of advisor, whether you're a mom and a teacher or whether you're a physician, who runs a hectic schedule and manages a hectic schedule every day. You should have people in your life that can help you see your blind spots. And that's why we're having this difficult conversation today about finances for doctors with Eunicia Peret of Excelstra. Because we have to have some challenging conversations. We have to start thinking about what is next for doctors. What is next for my career? I love seeing concierge doctors, keep a little bit of a foothold in their practice, but also live out their life, like live out their retirement years. I was talking with one concierge doctor just a few weeks ago at the conference, and he said, I had really struggled with like how to, save for retirement and how to should I just sell the practice and just be done? And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep my practice. I'm going to keep serving patients because that's what I really love to do. And I'm going to start spending some. I met with my financial planners and my legal team, and he said, I'm going to start spending some of the money I've earned and saved over all these years. And he's like, and I love my life. Like, I love being a doctor now. And he did before, but he's like, that was always like, I got to save it. I can't touch it. And there's a lot of questions I still have here, but let's dive into this one first, because those listening who are primarily physicians, whenever I ask a physician, hey, who's your dream patient? Like, who can you truly impact and affect change on their life? And I would say I've interviewed hundreds, if not a couple of thousand doctors over the last several years, and every one of them but two could answer that question. And those two were super young, so they didn't really know what they wanted or who they wanted could really affect change on. But every doctor is like, oh, I love the 43-year-old to 55-year-old female with this condition. And they're like, that's the patient I just love. And you can tell like their energy, they light up. Who is your ideal doctor, physician, client, or practice business model type that you're like, this is who I can really help? Maybe it's dentists, maybe it's surgeons, but ideally, what box do you just like, oh, this is the perfect, I love working with these because I know I can help you?
From a marketing perspective, that's a very strategic question. And we've looked at this internally with our advisors, with our consultants. And one of the things that we decided is that we're not going to tell anyone we just work with surgeons or we just work with high-end dentists. What we do tell clients is we work with the individuals, especially we're talking to physicians, practice owners that, or we do work with a lot of individuals that do work for hospital systems where they're bringing in high incomes into the household. They're overpaying in taxes. If the individual is in the 32 to 37% tax bracket, especially those that are in the 37% tax bracket, and historically they've not been able to bring that down, those are the individuals that we get pumped out about because there's so much that we can be doing to help them. We're also looking for the individuals, and I enjoy bringing those individuals, those clients into our fold that are eager and they're asking the question of, what am I missing? If they come to us and they tell us, well, I have a him or a her, I have a CPA, I have a financial advisor, I think I'm good, and they tell me that they're in the top level marginal tax bracket and they're complacent, where we can move mountains, but they have to be along for the ride, right? They have to want it. We cannot want it more for the individual than the business owner than they want it for themselves. So it's the individuals, the business owners, the practice owners that are eager and are saying, I know I need that. I love the fact that you talked about the board of advisors. They want insights into the things that nobody on their team is talking about. Those are the individuals that we will bring on. If they are complacent, we can't help them, because again, I can't want it more for them. We cannot want it as a company more for them than they want it for themselves. And unfortunately, it's not just among doctors, it's other industries as well. There's a lot of complacency. There's a lot of fear. Hey, I've paid to work with XYZ team. They promised that they're going to do it. They never did it. There's a lot of fear in the investment side. Will they be able to recuperate their investment? And what we tell our clients is, if we do not believe that we can demonstrate at least 3 times the return on their investment in working with us, we will not invite them to become a client, because we don't want, our clients are our best advertisement. Our clients become friends. Our clients have been with us for many years because they're seeing that value delivered year over year. So those are the type of clients. I know I went a little bit long, but individuals fall in different buckets, either because of need or because of fear, or both. And I feel like we need to, from a marketing perspective, it's not about how do we identify, this is Susie or this is John and he's blue with brown eyes. And it's not about that. It's about intrinsically what drives them. How is their heart? And the other thing is, are they humble enough to appreciate that there are people that will fight and go in above and beyond for them? Or are they on the spectrum of, well, everybody else has to just kind of do it for me? Those are not the individuals that we can help either. It's we're showing up, but we want to make sure that we show up in the environment where folks they're appreciative and they know, they sense, they understand that yes, somebody can and will fight for them and on their behalf.
You know, I want to press on that. I want to go down that rabbit trail just a few feet. And that is, I don't exactly know how to ask the question, but maybe it's more of a comment. The physicians or that you work with, or that you try to work with, when I guess that maybe the question is related to complacency. You just shake your head in frustration. What makes you shake your head in frustration? Or better yet, what breaks your heart about that complacency? Or maybe it's not complacency. It's just like, you're going down the wrong road. We've told you, you're not listening to the advice. And it's not to say our advice is better, but everybody's around you is telling you that you're heading in the wrong direction. Or, what breaks your heart when you think about these things related to doctors?
Oh my gosh, are you ready for me to open up this can of worms?
Well,
It's
little. I don't want to go I don't want
we
not
won't go too
tuna.
far, but you said something, Michael, that's very important for people to hear. And I said it earlier, and I need for folks to understand. If they're really listening and they really care, there are 2 camps of people. Either they have the experts or they have a him or a her. And we 100% know that we can do better. Here's why. Because we don't come and we don't tell clients, Eunicia or somebody on the team is going to do all of this for you. And there are way too many individuals that will say, oh, we've got you covered. And what makes me shake my head is the fact that they think that just because they have an aunt or an uncle or a BFF, that it's my best friend and I trust this person implicitly. Listen, when is the last time that person showed you the good, the bad, and the ugly of how your financial position is designed in such a way where he or she is literally and without a shadow of a doubt adding money into your pocket? Because what that also means when you have that conversation is they just told you that they probably cut as much as 50 to 75% of their commission. So for our listeners, ask yourself that question. When is the last time somebody set you down, one of your team members set you down to say, here is how we're going to be able to add an additional $250,000, an additional million, an additional 2 million or more to your bottom line, because here are the levers that we're doing to make sure that we're cutting out the excess fat. It doesn't happen. So we don't tell clients that, hey, your team is doing this or that or the other. What we know is, for example, right now we're speaking with a physician and his wife. They were in a situation where somebody sold them a defined benefit plan. Actually, it was a cash balance plan, and the person just told them every year, you need to put in another $500,000. And the wife said, it doesn't make sense based on what's the word I'm looking for? Goodness gracious, I'm lapsing. You're going to have to
The
cut this
gut
out, Mike.
feeling.
No, not the gut feeling, the actuaries, right? So based on what the actuarial team said, she went back to the financial advisor and said, we didn't have to put money into this plan for the last 3 years. Stop going to my husband and doing that. Long story short, they come out of this and they're like, okay, we're not going to put any more money. They find another financial advisor. This guy wants to sell them a whole life policy. They're telling them, just take the money out of the defined benefit plan, the cash balance plan, pardon me, and put the money over here. And I'm like, have you talked about what kind of a tax event you're going to be triggering on your head? Because you're like, oh, we're already looking at processes, and we're looking at plans and how this is going to work. I'm like, have you had the conversation about the tax impact you're going to be triggering? Because you're already a multi-7-figure revenue practice. Well, no, talk to us more about it. And I told him, I said, based on everything that you guys have told me, one single move could probably easily put an additional $2 million in your pocket. Like, why isn't anybody talking about this? They're not talking about it, Michael, because they're not incentivized to talk about it. This is not about let's be cute and just, you call and you have access to some person to talk about. This is about real strategy. We have the experts that we work with. Listen, they're individuals that if you just go knock on their door and say, can you please tell me and show me some tax strategies? The answer will be, who are you? Because we've been out there, that's what we do every single day. And they know that it's not about us working with them because we're going to try to duplicate what they do. That's not the point. The point is the client needs somebody to focus on their situation. And that's where we come in as a quarterback. So what makes my heart bleed, especially when I'm talking to physicians, they're investing money left, they're investing money right, and they go, oh, I need to see about this. But they're paying 37% marginal tax, all the way up to the tax top limit of the tax bracket every single year. If we just are able to save half or 40% of their taxes year over year, that would mean a lot of money to them. So why aren't they listening? Why are they so, I think we're okay? It's like, you have got to take a chance on you. And that's where I tell them, we lead by example. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on consultants every single year because I want for us to work with the best of the best. Because of that, guess what? Our clients are also getting visibility into some of those strategies, even business strategies that we glean from those experiences. But just like we're investing in our business and we're investing in our thought leadership internally, they too need to say, I'm willing to pay for that quote unquote board of directors because I'm ready. I have already graduated from the entry level. And if I don't go to the next level, I'm leaving a ton of money to chance. That's what makes my heart bleed when I hear them excusing themselves because of one reason or another.
I can tell you are passionate, and that's exactly why we're talking with Eunicia Peret today, the CEO and owner of Excelstra. We'll put the links in how to connect with Eunicia and her team at Excelstra. I want to take, before we turn back onto the main trail, I'm a hiker, so like I'm a camper, my kids, I'm involved in scouts, and so I always say like, hey, we're on the trail, and then we're just taking a quick detour real quick to see this over here. On this little bit of a rabbit trail before we go back onto the main topic, cognitive bias and an unbelief in myself. And you said something that was kind of interesting. Take a chance on yourself. And I think that when you get older, with age comes maturity. And with maturity comes, maybe more open-mindedness, especially about being a physician and taking an ownership role, taking a leadership role, and saying to yourself and in those around you, or feeding, your spouse. I always say, like, when my wife says something about real estate, she's a math person, and so when she's like, I always kind of like, oh no, we're gonna have to do this and real, because she's been right. It's like she has that guttural feeling that's just when she says something about this topic, I always listen. And I've learned that in marriage, that she's always right about certain things. And there is a little bit of a cognitive bias related to I'm not worth it. And I remember one physician, he said, my wife was treated like she was 6 inches tall in medical school. And I remember talking with another doctor. She was she taught physicians, about a particular subject. And she's like, Michael, not only is it going to take an act of Congress to change how we educate doctors, it's going to take an act of God. And then you see things like, the pandemic come in and how quickly some things change in the healthcare world. But when you're a young physician, especially, you're taught to be everything to everybody, make no money, and wear it like it's a badge of honor. And then there's this cognitive bias that kind of continues throughout your career to say, well, I'm not worth it. Like we've asked physicians, like, hey, did you give yourself a raise last year? And they're like, no, I haven't given myself a raise in like 3 years. It's like, I remember one doctor in Texas, he's like, even if it's $5, give yourself that mental raise. I mean, this is ridiculous that we even have to talk about this kind of stuff. But to get past the belief, I think when you're older is a little bit easier. But how do you help physicians take a chance on themselves to say, it's okay to make money? And because in healthcare, it wants to get a pass because, well, we're taught to do no harm. And that means maybe even doing no financial harm to our patients. But that makes sense completely. However, when you look at investing money in your practice, investing money in yourself, sending your team to, customer service training, investing in new paint color in your practice, buying this piece of real estate over here because it helps you become a better leader. You're like, there are things I learned being a doctor and running a practice over here that I just wanted to learn about real estate, And so by learning about real estate, it helped me become a better physician, a better practice office, per CEO in my practice. And so what does that conversation look like when you say, look, you can make money and it's okay to be a physician and make money because that money flows back into the community? Because I've never met too many selfish physicians. There's a few out there, but for the most part, 98% of them are awesome. And what does that conversation look like to say, hey, take a chance on yourself?
I love this conversation. In my mind, it goes into two areas, Michael. One of them is, and I'll never forget, I was in Oregon, and my husband reminded me that I was in Oregon, and I should have perhaps taken it from a different angle. But we had the conversation specifically about taxes, and it was a women's physician retreat that one of my best friends, who is a retired physician, hosted, and one of the ladies who was kind of not as new to the she was, I'm sorry, newer to the group. She was a cardiologist. When we talked about how the wealthy actually get to pay less in taxes, and oh, by the way, the wealthy also are able to, in many cases, send the kids to college scotch-free while everybody else gets to pay. She almost became a little bit agitated because she said, well, we have the money. The problem is that if we pay less in taxes, the single mom who's working 2 and 3 jobs is not going to be able to put foot on the table. And then consequently, if we make money, why wouldn't we pay out of pocket for our kids' school? I said, okay, let's unpack that for a second. That single mom that's working 2 and 3 jobs, she's probably not taking advantage of the healthcare and all of the government giveaways that your hard-earned tax money is paying for. So here's the freedom that you get to have when you get to direct the money. You save that money from taxes and you want to still have the same amount out the door. That's okay. Let's find who those people are, because she's working 2 to 3 jobs. But did you know that especially in states like Oregon and California and some other states as well, you've got people who literally know how to milk the system so that your hard-earned tax money, they basically take advantage of it because they can. The government and the state is paying for their health care, for their kids to go to school, for their meals at school, and it's okay to not work and just fill out paperwork every single day. We're not talking about that person. We're talking about the person that needs the help and they're not going to ever ask because they're working the 2 to 3 jobs. And so when we had that discussion, immediately you could see the light bulb going off, because those are things that physicians in general, they don't understand what actually even happens with their tax money and the power that they could have actually making a much bigger impact philanthropically if they got to direct that money based on how they, at their discretion, based on where they see that the needs in society are. So that's one. The other component is the fact that historically physicians have been used, abused, overcharged, overpromised, underdelivered, and they've lost faith. They don't know where to go. They're trained that you cannot, they're trained. You cannot trust anybody because you're going to be taken advantage of. And then they come out of school and they start practicing, and it happens exactly like that because unfortunately, there's a lot of bad blood out there taking advantage of owners, of practice owners, of physicians that are not gullible, but they don't have the time to see the forest for the trees. So they get burnt once, they get burnt twice, they hear of a friend getting burnt, they hear of mom and dad and whomever else that are also physicians, and now they've lost trust. And I'll tell you, Michael, when all of our physicians, one of them in particular, he's a surgeon, he came to one of our mastermind events, and in a room full of people, he said, Eunicia, everything that I heard here has been mind boggling in terms of why don't people talk about this? Why don't we have access to these strategies? But I'm still going to the same question of who can I trust? And I turned towards him. He's a dear, dear friend as well. And I said, you can't trust anyone. What I will tell you is the only thing you can trust is the hardcore proof in the numbers. And that's exactly where when we talk to people, that's why I said earlier, you can lead a horse to water. We can't make anybody drink it. The idea is the individual needs to be in the mindset needs to be one where they go, I know I've been burnt, but I'm hearing and it's piquing my interest and I'm not going to back down. I'm going to at least figure this thing out. Can I get the results that are being promised to me? Because if they can, the difference is huge. But that's one of the issues with the medical society and a lot of physicians is even physicians are shying away. We actually partner with a physician on the investment side, and one of the things he said is he went to a medical-led investor conference, and he said, Eunicia, those doctors, you've got a household that makes 400, 500,000, maybe more, and they're going to these booths like sheep to the slaughter, investing in syndicates and God knows what else is being proposed. He said, you and I both know that the investments worth investing into, they're not being found at conferences. Nobody's going to sit behind a booth to gather the masses. But they're so hungry that they don't know where to turn. And because of that, they fall prey. It's costing them more and more and more every single year. They lose money. And then they continue to lose that credibility. So the work that we do in the medical, among physicians and in the medical world is to help educate and empower physicians to think differently. Whether they become clients or not, that's besides the point. The idea is physicians are recognizing that it's hard to speak to physicians, and many of them have completely exited and gone and they work with other industries because it's easier to penetrate. We've said, you know what, to us, it's not about quote unquote penetrating the market, it's about educating, because what we're seeing is that when doctors hear that there is a different story, the ones that self-select themselves, there's a lot to win for them, and there are everybody else, at least they hear, and hopefully in time they'll realize that they too have the opportunity to make things better financially for themselves, keep more at the end of the day.
Well, that is very insightful. And I know I was recently having a conversation with my daughter and my son. They're both teenagers, and we don't watch a lot of ads anymore because we're all impacted by streaming services. But you see the occasional ad or you hear something on the radio, and your teenager will tell you like, "Oh, that sounds like a really good deal. I think we should buy that." And you're like, if it was that good, they wouldn't be selling it saying that you can make $1 million buying their product. Like they would just stop selling it because they would be wealthy enough that they wouldn't have to sell that product, right? So it's a little bit of reverse psychology for them to understand like you can't trust everybody, everything that you hear out there. Be educated. And that's the same thing we say about, membership medicine, concierge medicine is like before you move in, if you're a physician curious about this, you need to go get your unofficial MBA in this, like learn, go in with eyes wide open, talk to everybody and everyone out there, not just colleagues who got the same amount of business education or finance education that you did, go talk and help yourself, take a chance on yourself to see your own blind spots. And so we kind of coming in for our lightning round of questions with Eunicia Peret. She's the CEO and owner of Excelstra. We'll put the links on how to connect with Excelstra and Eunicia to learn more about what Excelstra does, what Eunicia and her team talk about and can help physicians do. But before we move on to the lightning round of a few questions for you, I want to bring to your attention something that I found so fascinating. And really, it's not even a question. It's more of I think once you hear the commentary on it related to cognitive bias, I think that you'll have some thoughts on it. I want to hear your thoughts. So I want to bring to the listeners' attention there's something interesting I stumbled into recently. And it's not new by any means, but it's called Gelman amnesia. And Gelman amnesia is a cognitive bias that describes when someone trusts, for example, media reports or something that they hear at a conference or something that they hear a colleague talk about on topics outside of your current expertise. So if you're a primary care and you're like, I'm awesome at diabetes and I'm awesome at bumps and bruises and like I know my stuff about vaccines. Even when they know that the media, for example, misrepresents topics that they are familiar with, that they're like, yeah, I read an article about diabetes, and it's like, that's not how it is out there, right? And the term was coined by novelist Michael Crichton in 2002. And Crichton was named after the effect of the Nobel Prize winning physicist Murray Gell-Mann, and who was discussed the phenomenon with. And the effect is a defense mechanism that stems from the desire to believe that there are more trustworthy sources of information than there actually are. An example of Gell-Mann amnesia is when we read that newspaper article with so many errors, or we go to a conference, like you were just talking about. You had a client came back and was like, they're being spoon-fed this stuff, and they're swarming the tables afterwards. And we recognize that, the rest of the whatever else we read is we just assume it's all accurate when it's not in our subject matter expertise. Give us your thoughts on that.
As you're talking about that, I can think of an example where, and I mentioned this briefly earlier, somebody will come and say, my best friend, my husband's best pal, they've been together, they've known each other, you see, since college or university, whatever it might be, and he or she is managing our money. One particular example, husband and wife, he's the owner of a marketing company. She's an executive, funny enough, for an accounting firm. Between the two of them, they pay well over $400,000 in taxes every single year. When we talked, that's on the tax side. When we talked about the investments, they had absolutely everything that you can buy if you walk into an investment office, a Merrill Lynch or whatever, just like the cookie cutter. You can just see it, it's there. And their question was, how can we do better? And the discussion that we had was, okay, so yes, there's an investment, but if even you saving 40% or 50% on taxes more than compensated your investment multiple times, what would that be worth to you? And oh, by the way, what if when we look at the financial side, we can show you how you're probably bleeding in certain areas to the tune of minimum $250,000 to $500,000 minimum. We're talking about those kinds of numbers when we're talking about a household of around $200,000. But let's discount that. What would that look like to you? And the husband came back and he's like, but my best friend, we shoot the breeze. We meet every Friday. He's doing all that for us. That is what I would say probably one of the example of Gelman amnesia is just because it's somebody that you trust and you like. It doesn't matter that if you bring on additional support, if you have a board of advisors, you don't choose your BFFs to be on your board of advisors. You choose people that can be objective, that can give you thought leadership through angles that if it wasn't for them, you would not be exposed to, even from a business standpoint. Those are the types of people you want on your team. And so how do we fix the problem? I think, Michael, is just by going out there and educating people more and more about whatever their amnesia is specifically. It's stop and smell the roses, or stop and take a look at your situation and ask yourself the question, what if you could recuperate $500,000 or $3 million or $5 million? It's relative, right? Based on the individual situation. What would that look like to you? So if that money could be redeployed towards causes and things that maybe your family, maybe your business, maybe philanthropic causes, what kind of a legacy would you be able to leave behind if you were able to make that small incremental shift in possibly the first year alone? What would that look like? And if we are able to have doctors are exceptionally intelligent individuals. I know it because, again, I'm married into a family of physicians. And my husband was supposed to be one. In a way, I thank God he didn't become a doctor, because now our kids are looking at the lifestyle and they're saying, we don't want that lifestyle. We want the freedom. I would encourage everybody to just really take a pause and ask themselves, how can we get past our biases to at least allow us enough breathing room to ask the question of, are we okay leaving massive amounts, knowledge, insights to chance? Whether it's money, whether it's legacy, whether it's something else, are we okay leaving it to chance? And if the answer is yes, then by all means, you probably already rest well at night and you don't have any issues. But if you're not resting well at night because you have some of those questions that are running through your head, that's where you want to surround yourself. You want to have that, I'll call it financial board of directors, right? You need to have your checks and balances. And again, it doesn't mean that you need to let go of your existing team. It just means that you need to ask the right questions and have the support that will help you identify, do you have the objective and unbiased insights into your specific situation that can maximize the way that you build wealth, the way that you safeguard your wealth, the way that you protect it for future generations.
My advice to the doctors listening would be, and this is not a professional advice because I'm just a nobody, the question you should be asking is to your board of advisors, to your financial team, would be these 5 words. How can we do better? How can we do better? Like, that's what you should be asking your team. That's what you should be asking your staff. That's how you should be asking your patients. And that's what you should be asking the people that you're getting advice from and the companies that you're working with. Like, challenge them. Say, hey, how can we do better? And our guest today is Eunicia Peret. She's the CEO and owner of Excelstra. We'll put how to connect with Eunicia to learn how to connect with her and ask her and her team, how can we do better? And as we come in for our lightning round with Eunicia, here are a few questions. You could be however long-winded or as brief as you'd like. Kind of have 4 or 5 of these questions. Not sure if we'll get to all of them, but let me say this as we talk about knowing your numbers. And what that's going to be the topic. I'm going to let you riff on that for a moment, but let me say this is when, like, as a marketing guy, as a public relations kind of understanding that from a public relations perspective, public relations is reputation management. It's about branding, right? And so when we ask physicians like, okay, so you are always struggling with this mystery of new patient referrals. How do I grow my practice? How do I scale and level up my practice? I just don't know how to go get the new patient referrals. I don't know how they happen, and I'm afraid to ask patients, how did you hear about us? But what they'll do is they'll ask a colleague, for example, because that's what they're used to. They're used to saying, well, what do you think about this case? What do you think about this? You know, what do you think about this? And so they're constantly going to those other physicians for medical and clinical insights, but they're sometimes making the mistake of going to their buddies, like you're saying, your best friends, and saying, "Well, what did you do, and who did you use? You know, like what did you? Do you think I could? Can I get their name? Like, can I talk to them too?" And so then we put a pin in that for a moment and say, "Okay, so how many business credit hours?" And you could say the same about finances. Like, how many finance classes did you take in medical school? I'm like, how many business marketing courses did you take in medical school? And usually it was like well under 10 credit hours. And it's like, okay, so let's put a pin in those hours. How many medical school, clinical hours? Oh, hundreds, right? And then it's like, okay, so when you want to level up your practice, grow your practice, market your practice, brand your practice, learn about finances, who are you going to go get advice from? And they're like, oh, I go to my clinicians because I don't want a non-clinician telling me how to, practice my business and do these types of things. It's like, okay, well, now that we put these two together, your buddies, you got the same amount of credit hours on education about marketing or about finance as you did. And do you think that that's really the best person to help you see your blind spots? It's not to say that they're giving you bad advice. It's to say maybe you probably need to surround yourself with a team that can say, hey, how can we do better and help you see your blind spots? And by all means, if you're married, oh my goodness, please listen to your spouse about these types of things. So talk to us about the importance of knowing your numbers, and you're welcome to riff on that commentary just a little bit.
You mentioned a lot of unbelievable items that so much could be taken away from. One example that comes to mind is a physician husband and wife. Together they were well over $1 million. He's a surgeon, she owns her own practice. And when they came to us, they had gone into investments because they wanted to go. Remember, we talked about the physicians want more, but to your point, they ask their friends. Long story short, they went into partnership with some friends of theirs into real estate property, short-term rentals in Florida. And when we started looking at their portfolio, they're literally forking out money every single month to the tunes of several thousands of dollars per property just to keep the lights on. And that's after the income comes on. We had a client that had purchased property internationally because it was coveted. They're going to be able to, same thing, they're going to be able to do short-term rentals, and every single month it was costing them money. So when we sat down and we looked at the numbers, we had to involve the husband, and he said, I've been telling my wife for a while that she needs to sell. She needed to hear, and we're talking about a physician family as well, she needed to hear from somebody else. However, when they were working with the somebody else before, by the way, not all, just because somebody has acronyms behind their name, it only means so much. It doesn't mean that you're going to get the best information unless, to understand your numbers, you have the right support team that can look at it from different angles. Why do I say that? Another example, recently we were talking with one of our clients, financial planners, who happened to be the individual's son. And we were talking about a specific strategy, and the son said, can we talk? I said, of course. We've been talking all along about all the different strategies. And so why this strategy? Because it's more expensive than what they would do elsewhere. And I said, okay, talk to me about expense. Let's talk about expense ratios based on what? And Michael, by the time that conversation was done, he said, I got my CFP a few years ago. None of this was ever taught in any of our classes.
Mhm.
And so when individuals kind of go in blindly with not understanding truly the numbers, and I love the fact that you talked about the numbers, they have to understand that's exactly why we take the approach of trust the numbers. Don't trust what somebody tells you, is look at the proof is in the pudding. Because when you can, the numbers are speaking for themselves. You don't have to argue anything. They're there black on white. When they're not, and we just trust because we trust, that's not a good idea personally or on the business side.
Well, and this is another business principle of insideritis, right? Like I love it's another business principle that I think is often neglected and ignored in healthcare. And it's where we focus on the internal operations. And it's like, well, you know what? Those are all really good ideas, Eunicia. Those are all really good ideas, coming from this piece, this company or this person, but that's not how we do things here. Or, you can, to me, it's insideritis is like a cancer in healthcare. Like it impacts every part of your culture, your business, and your practice is a business. And here's why I'm so passionate about overlapping and saying like the stuff that's happening in business, like go send your team to, a customer service and hospitality conference, for example. Like businesses spend a ton of money every single year investing in their team on stuff like this. But yet you think that you should get a pass just because you're busy or just because like, well, that won't really work. I'll tell you, it sure does work because patients are burned out as well as physicians, not to the same level, but to the point where, we will take our feet somewhere else. Like we will vote with our wallet and our feet, and we will go find another doctor's office that I get a feeling that they care about me. And it's just, but the insideritis thing is if you are ignoring your numbers, that is one of the top 10 signs that you have insideritis is, and I think it was coined by Carey Nieuwhof. He's got a great book about scheduling called At Your Best, and it really helps kind of red light, yellow light, green light your day and help you schedule what you're really passionate about versus like, oh, I could phone this in versus like, oh, I just hate doing wrenching on this side of the business in the red light zone. But nonetheless, insideritis is you can see a symptom of it if you're ignoring your numbers and you're thinking like, I just don't want to look at the numbers because it's just bad news and we've got the money to cover it. But that's not the point. I just don't know anything about it, so I just kind of ignore it. And as long as we got the money to pay for it, let's just kind of keep on going. Like I know it's a problem. We're gonna have to wrestle with that animal later, but I don't want to wrestle with it today.
Sir Richard Branson, to that point, really quickly, Michael. Sir, I read an article recently. Sir Richard Branson said that if you're not willing to lose, of course, please keep in mind we're talking about big numbers here. If you're not willing to lose $100 million, do not expect to make $1 billion. It's the same exact thing, whether you own a business or whether you're in a practice, whether even if you're working as for a hospital system, if you want to move to the next level, you're going to have to invest into yourself. The ideas, the strategies, whether it be personal, business, financial, or anything else in between, the free stuff, they're nothing more than just ways to get you in. If you want to move yourself to the next level, you have to invest and you have to sometimes take a chance on yourself. Of course, it has to be an educated decision. There has to be a strategy behind it. So don't just go out blindly and say, I'm going to invest because I want to make a lot of money. That's not the point. The point is, as long as you have the right structure, the right team, the right strategies, it makes it much easier to say, yes, I know that there's a little bit of risk or there's a little bit of an investment, but I also know that I need to do this in order to gain the returns. And that's what all of the successful business owners do. And that's where I feel like physicians, especially practice owners, can truly learn from when it comes to even some of the business practices.
Well, a big topic we could probably save for another day is exits and valuations. But is that just very briefly, is that something that you talk with? It's part of, the strategies of helping doctors exit their practices, evaluate their practices, or do you fold in other experts as well into that conversation?
It's a mix. So yes, would absolutely love to have that conversation. We do talk with all of our clients about exits because everybody has a different approach, and there's part of it is numbers, part of it is operations, part of it is mindset. There are a lot of different things to unpack there. And yes, we do handle those for our clients, and would love to pick up the conversation on that.
All right, second to last question. Our guest today is Eunicia Peret. She's the CEO and owner of Excelstra. We'll put how to connect with Eunicia in the show notes below. Books you recommend or books you're reading, could be pleasure, could be business, could be healthcare, whatever, but maybe a book that you've recently read that you're like, we put together a list twice a year, once in the summer and once over the holidays for doctors that are like, oh yeah, I love those books. And funny enough, most of those books, like a few of them are about longevity or diabetes or whatever it might be, but most of them are business books. And I love to see these entrepreneurial tendencies being followed in healthcare by particularly concierge doctors for the most part. But tell us a little bit about maybe a book that you're reading or that you give away most.
Um, Two books that I really, really love. One of them I actually just, funny enough, it's been on my radar for a while, but it was part of an executive group that I'm in. They wanted to do a book club, so we did it. So I'll start with that first. It's 10x is easier than 2x. That's a great, great read, especially for practice owners. And then the other one that I absolutely love is Who Not How. Who Not How is a book that we should challenge ourselves with that question every single day. Just basically identify what are the things that are not in our wheelhouse, and we should not be the ones to try to figure out. Finances being one of those. And by the way, that's exactly why, even when it comes to how we do business, we constantly ask the question of who can we ensure that will be there to help us deliver against what needs to be delivered, not the how. Because way too many people just they think that they're asking the who, but they're really constantly asking the how, and then they try to do it, and it goes off rails. And that applies to really all areas of life.
That does sound like an interesting book, and I kind of I remember talking about this to concierge doctors a couple of years ago. I don't remember who said it, but it was something to the lines of, we should be saying in our staff meetings more wow, not how. When we can how good people out the door so quickly, like, well, how they bring up a good idea in a staff meeting, or they bring a good idea to the boss or to the physician, and it's like, well, how are we going to get that done? Like, how are we going to pay for that? And it's like, okay, never mind. I'll just keep my head down and not bring you new ideas because you just shoot them down every single time. But instead, if we were like, wow, you know what? Like, let's think about how we could, that's a really good idea. Let's think about what could we do to make that happen? And I mean, how has to be a part of the question, but nonetheless. All right, thank you for those. Our final question for Eunicia Peret, the CEO and owner of Excelstra, is, I'm sure I ask this of all of our guests, and it's always, which story do I choose? But our question this year is, what's one thing that you can think of your clients, you can think of maybe something you've done personally in the business or something you've done personally, that you're just like, you know what, that was it. Like I could die happy with that story right there. What's one thing that you're so glad you did?
Can I tell you an end result? Because as you
Sure.
were talking about that, that's what popped into my mind. It's actually one of our physician clients. When we first started working together, it's same individual that asked, who can I trust? Foreshadowing. Of course, we started working together, and a year after we started working together, we looked at the numbers, and we were at a conference, and a very prestigious dentist came, and he said, what it sounds like what you guys do, it just sounds too good to be true. Like, it's too hard. Nobody can deliver what you're saying you can deliver. And so I said, you've already met Dr. So and so. Oh, by the way, dear friend. So I called him over, and I said, call him by his first name. I said, can you please tell so and so what was the return on your investment in working with us? And he said, we just looked at this again last night because the numbers just sound too good to be true. And they sound too good to be true. He said, it's 50 times. It's stories like that when I think of listen, we have some hard days, and we've got some really big boulders that we're pushing up the hill for our clients. Anytime we're doing that and we're feeling the pressure of these boulders going up the hill, that's what resonates. It's the impact that we make for our clients. And when I know that their families are going to be positioned for a financial future that would not otherwise have been possible, they would have still been okay. Don't get me wrong, more than okay by most standards. But to truly see the impact, when you hear people saying that one thing, Eunicia, that one thing helped me make better decisions and I rest better at night, that's the kind of stuff that makes my heart sing for joy every day.
Wow. That's great. Well, thank you for sharing that. And, when you said something like he looked at it that night, was he already a client and he was seeing the results of that return on investment? Because you can't make promises or guarantees in finance world. Expand on that just a little bit more in case someone missed that.
He was already a client. We had been working together for over a year. So full transparency, completely agree. In finance, we cannot make guarantees. What we do know is that based on specific parameters, we will know before we work with the client whether or not we're able to deliver them the results that we think they are looking for. And that's where we tell them, if we don't show you how you can at least 3 times your investment with us, you will never be invited to come into our world. So when we give that guarantee to individuals and they still choose to say, well, but how exactly are you going to do that? It's like, okay, you missed the point. That's where they can go back to their team and they can try to squeeze water out of a dry well to say, what more can we do? By the way, they've already sold you everything that they possibly could have sold you. They might sell you some more stuff, but that's not going to solve your problem. So yes, these are for clients. We would never claim anything that has not truly been implemented.
Wonderful. And that doctor that you're talking about that gave hey, I'm a recipient. I have been a client of Eunicia and Excelstra's, and I can tell you that, yeah, like I'm blown away. And am I describing that interaction between the doubter and the current client correctly?
Yes, that is an accurate description, because the doubter said, I'm intrigued, we need to talk. I said, notice, I'm not even inviting you to talk. Like, if you have a problem, if you fit this criteria, these are the type of clients that we work with, happy to jump on a call. And that's where he said, it just sounds too good to be true. I said, you know what? It might be, who knows? But let me introduce you to somebody that you understand, that's in the medical field, that that they've experienced some of the same things that you've experienced. You've been burnt by many situations. So has he. You guys talk. Let me know how you want to go from there. So yes.
Well, and that's the next step. If you're wondering about how can you do better, that would just be your next step. Surround yourself with a team of people who can help you see your blind spots. And if you'd like to connect with Eunicia and her team over at Excelstra, we'll put the links in the show notes below. There's no pressure to do so. But we've given you, I think, a lot to think about today on the podcast and the program, and a lot to really chew on. And if it has gotten you thinking, then good. That's where we need to be. So as we always say around here, it is no longer about being the best doctor in the world anymore. And that includes your finances. It includes your investments. It includes who you're surrounding yourself with. It even includes, we did an interview recently about marriages and focusing on the marriages of physicians and keeping those healthy. Surround yourself with good teams. And that is so important. It's no longer about being the best doctor in the world anymore. It's about being the best doctor for the world, for your patients, and for your local community. And be a good lever. And thank you so much for being our guest today, Eunicia. It has been a pleasure, and I look forward to a next conversation coming up soon. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Mike.